네, 모두 식사 맛있게 하셨을까요?
Did you all enjoy your
두
lunch?
번째 세션과 메인 세션
We will
2를
now
진행하도록
begin the
하겠습니다.
second session.
세션 2는 두뇌
Second
혁명,
session is
빅데이터
titled Brain
생성형 AI
Revolution, the
시대라는
era of
주제로
generative
진행됩니다.
AI.
그럼 첫 번째 강연은 대규모 언어 기반 모델을 위한 데이터 중심
Now, the
AI라는
first
주제로 브라이언 키안
type,
시앙로
presentation will be by
AI 연구소
Brian
부소장님께서
Kayan Siangro
스피치
of
진행해
Singapore's
주시겠습니다.
National University.
브라이언 키안 시앙로 부소장님을 무대 위로
Please
모시겠습니다.
welcome
모두 큰 박수
Associate
부탁드립니다.
Vice President Brian Kayan Sianglo.
Thanks for having me. So for today, I will be talking about why we should be paying attention to data in machine learning. And I'll be talking about data-centric AI for large language foundation models, and specifically on resource-efficient, for resource-efficient AI and AI to check on AI. Okay, I want to thank all the members of my research group as well as my collaborators, right, for all this work that we have done that I'm going to present to you about. So, a decade ago, my students are usually working on separate problems individually, but they still do it now, except that they're doing it in teams. Why is that the case? It's because the pace of AI research is being accelerated. They don't really have the luxury of spending a year or two to finish a project. So right now, collaboration is key. Now, more into data-centric AI. So in the more conventional or prevalent setting, most people are focusing on model-centric approaches, where the data is kept fixed, and the modeling techniques such as the neural network architectures, the optimization, hyperparameter tuning methods, they are being iterated and improved. I think many of you would have heard about all the various large language models from the big techs, right? Like OpenAI, Google, Anthropic. Now they produce models which are what I call closed source. So they won't tell you how they develop the models or what code they have used, how they train their models. And I think many of you have also heard about DeepSeek. They have recently announced additional 5 code repos, right, that they have open source. But there's actually one thing that all these big techs have not released, and it is the data, right? Why is that the case? How valuable is their data? Whose data have they used? Is more data always better, right? So to understand this and figure out the secret recipe, I would actually recommend thinking about data-centric approaches to improving model performance. And what's different is that in this new age of data-centric approaches, the data is being actively iterated using techniques like augmentation, pre-processing, data valuation, or data selection, while all the other components in the machine learning pipeline, they are being kept fixed. Now, data-centric AI is even more important in the age of LLMs, right, or large language models. Now, in particular, for this model architecture and optimization algorithms that are being used to train the LLMs, they have almost remained nearly the same to date, right? Now, it is the data that actually results in different models being produced. Now, companies and organizations, they crawl the data from the internet, right? And very often your data, right? And they create a very high quality data set, involve human in the loop to filter, to clean, to select and label this data so that you get a better performing LLM by training on all this data. Now, on the right-hand side of this slide, you can see that this is a very classic scaling law plot by OpenAI. It shows that the larger the model, right, the more data it can consume, and hence the better performance. Now, I'll be telling you about resource-efficient AI, right, which is going to be my first topic. So one key question that we should be asking ourselves, right? Do we really need that much data? And very often, it is the big techs that can gather this amount of data, but for the other companies, we can't. Now, we all know that in today's AI models, they are actually being trained on massive data sets. But I think one key question is that, we have to ask ourselves, are all the data equally useful? Now, what if we can teach the models just as well, right, or even better, using only high-quality data examples? So what's interesting is that if you can take a look at this plot, which is a research that we do, the y-axis would be the model performance. Now, what we have shown is that, and the x-axis would be the amount of data that you have used for the LLM. Now, what we have shown here is that, in fact, if we only use 5%, right, 5% of all the data, it's able to achieve actually a much better performance than the one that is being trained on all the data. So why is it that less data actually works? So there are three main reasons, right? We have found that in all the data, there's going to be data that's noisy. When you remove that, the model performance becomes better, right? There are data that's irrelevant to the task that you want to use the models on. And not just that, there would be redundant data as well. Redundant in the sense that you have a lot of data that are very similar, and hence you actually don't need so much data. Now, why is it that having less data matters? Now, these are some of the key reasons. If you can train with much less data, right, it is faster. That means your model gets to converge faster. You can use the model earlier. It also means that you can reduce the compute costs that you have to pay, right, as well as the data curation cost. Now, it also means that you can reduce the impact on the environment because there's less heat generated, right, more energy efficient. And at the same time, it means that we can train safer and more targeted models by using data that we have selected. So, in fact, efficient learning, right, isn't just possible, it is the future. So these are some of the works that our research group has done. If you take a look at the top left-hand corner, right, I call it the top M. This is the one where we try to find the most valuable data in the entire data set, and we can actually do that 50 times faster than the existing methods. Now, on the top right-hand corner, the duet, right, this is the one where, when you're given a task, you actually don't know what data will be useful. You have a lot of data with you, right? And our technique allows you to pick the right mixture of data, put them together, and look at the performance through the feedback from the task, right? And be able to optimize or re-optimize the mixture of the data. Now, on the bottom right, you see the work on NICE. That's the one that we are going to present at the ICML conference in Vancouver this year. Right. This is the one where we can select data that can directly optimize, right, the downstream performance using a reinforcement learning method called policy gradient. And on the bottom left, that's the one that we have just finished. So it's going to appear on arXiv soon. Right. This is the one where we are collecting or gathering human feedback in a very efficient way so that we can do LLM or model alignment. Now, what are some of the practical implications and business opportunities, right, if you can learn with less data? Now, first and foremost, for some of these companies, you can think about curating various small-scale, high-quality data sets for different tasks that can actually reduce the cost of training, the energy costs, and even the transmission costs, right, when you use all this data for model training and fine-tuning. Now, in the slide before this, right, you have also seen that we have introduced some of these automated data selection algorithms. And what it means for the developers and the AI scientists, right, is that they don't need to worry about how to mix data from different domains for a new task. And they don't have to worry also about how to remove noisy data, redundant data, irrelevant data for the new task. Now, what they can instead focus on is to gather a large pool of diverse data and also how to evaluate the downstream tasks, right? This is something they can do. Okay, now I'm done with the first topic on data efficient or resource efficient AI. Of course, in terms of resources, data is not the only one. We have done other works on how to be compute efficient and how to be model efficient as well. Now, the next work that I want to talk about is whether we can develop AI algorithms and techniques to actually check on AI, right? To check on AI models. Two of the works that we will be talking about would be data attribution and provenance. And the second one is actually to think about evaluating the models, whether they have removed our data or not, or whether they are able to unlearn the data that have been used to train on. Now, let me motivate these problems to you. So for the first one, right, imagine an AI model, right, as a student who has read a huge pile of materials. And now when we ask the AI a question, it actually gives an answer, but we don't know which part, right, of the reading, in fact, influences the model response, right? We often ask the question, does it rely on accurate or biased information? Does it copy something private? And what if its answer is wrong? How do we fix it, right? These are all critical questions, and without knowing the data behind the AI's response, we can't actually answer them. So that's why the problem of data attribution and provenance matter. Now, more importantly, since we know that training a large model like ChatGPT, it requires a lot of data, and this data is actually collected from the internet. It may happen that some of this data that are collected is without the permission of the data owners, right? And this may harm the copyrights or intellectual properties of the data owner. A very recent example that many of you may have known is where the New York Times have sued OpenAI, right, for using their data in the training of ChatGPT, right, without permission. So, as a data owner, can I find out where the training data of the model comes from, right? Can I also check whether the data that has been used in the model? Now, data attribution and data provenance are the solution to these issues, right? Without a way to trace training data, we cannot establish laws and rules governing the curation of the training data. So this is some of the works where we have done, our research that we have done to answer the following question. Why does AI give this response, right? Now, if you take a look at the top right-hand corner on the work on detail, you can provide a prompt to GPT, and detail actually looks inside the prompt and shows you which examples in your prompt is the AI using, all right? And then on the bottom right, that's FreeSharp, it finds out which training data made the model performance better or worse, all right? And then at the bottom right, called WASA, right? Now this is the one where we started doing it in June 2023, right? It's only published this year. But if you recall, towards the end of 2023, that's when all the, some of these big techs got sued, right? Because of copyright. So at that time, when we look at this work, we wanted to think about attribution, data attribution, that actually allows us to tag AI-generated text with hidden markers to trace the origin or the data source, all right? And in the top left-hand corner, that's waterfall, right? It marks the real-world content so that we know if AI has actually learned from it. Okay, now I'll proceed to talk about another form of AI algorithms to check on AI. Now, one of the issues that has actually gained more attention recently is, like I've mentioned just now, the models are frequently trained on vast amounts of data, and they can include undesirable data, either inadvertently or due to negligence. And this can include copyrighted, private, harmful, or even outdated content. And it can raise, data ownership concerns and limit the usefulness of the models. Now, earlier on, when I mentioned about tracing the model generation back to the data source, right, using data attribution techniques that I've introduced in the previous slide. Now, but even after we have identified those undesirable data or data that's copyrighted, how do we deal with it, right? How do we deal with it? Now, one of the naive approach is actually to remove the data and retrain the model altogether, right, by excluding the data that you want to be removed. But this is very, very costly in terms of money or time, right, to train the models again. And you'll be surprised, right, to train LLMs, you can require millions of dollars and months of time. So, the question, of course, is whether there's a way to remove the data from the model after it has already been trained. And this is a problem that we call machine unlearning. Now, what's interesting is that, our very first work dates back to 2020, where we published it in the NeurIPS conference, right? And when we started working on the problem in 2018, I was working together with some of the cybersecurity experts. It wasn't even about copyrighted data, right? It's about cybersecurity. At that time, we were very concerned about the following problem, right? We have a model that is constantly ingesting data in a data stream, right? It's constantly flowing in. But a few weeks later, we found out actually our model has been attacked, right, by poison data. And because of that, we want to unlearn the past 3 weeks of data. Could that have been done? So that was the first moment 6 years or 7 years ago that we looked at the problem of machine unlearning. Then, but at that time, it's quite interesting. We thought this will come up, right? But then it didn't really come up for a few years. It was, machine unlearning is still not that popular, but it is only in the late 2023, early 2024, where the problem of machine unlearning became very, very popular because of copyrighted content being used by the big techs in the models itself, right? So now we are developing techniques for that. Now, at that time, one interesting problem that I have met, right, which took us about 3 to 4 years, right, is that when we have a request to unlearn some user's data, we can do it once. But when there are multiple user requests coming to us, like 1,000, right, our machine learning model, through the unlearning method, it cannot handle so many requests to remove users' data. The model performance will drop significantly, all right? So the question for us is whether we can do unlearning sequentially by handling multiple user requests to remove their data. So we managed to do it through this work. Okay, now the introduction of machine unlearning, it brings up another question. How do we know if the data is truly removed, right? Can we verify that the removal of data is purely based on the model performance or model utility after unlearning? Is there a way to evaluate the extent of unlearning, right? So, very recently, right, we proposed the very first data-centric unlearning metric. It's based on the text watermarking of waterfall that I presented earlier. Now, what's happening is that for the existing unlearning metrics, like how successful are you in unlearning, right? It actually suffers from quite a few issues, like if they have similar data in the data to be removed versus the data to remain in the model, it can cause the metric score to be very similar before and after unlearning, right? Secondly, right, for some of these metrics that measure the success of unlearning, right, they need to reference the retrained model. That's the model that needs to train on all the data except the ones that has to be removed. Now that's highly impractical because of the computational and monetary costs. So that's why we arrive at this, right? A data-centric unlearning metric. It relies on watermarking strength. It's orthogonal to the model performance, right? And it's effective even when there are similar data that we want only part of it to be removed, and it doesn't require us to retrain the model. Now, we have empirically shown that our technique called water drum, right? It performs well under very practical settings while other metrics have failed. Okay, now this is my last slide, right? In terms of AI to check on AI, right? What are some of these practical implications and business opportunities? Now, some of these companies out there, right? You can think about developing evaluation and audit tools for AI safety that can check if the harmful data, the copyrighted data, the private data, or the outdated data, they are indeed being used or being removed, right? That's very important to know. Now, note that these tools that we have introduced, right, they don't come at the expense of the model performance. In other words, the model's performance is still being preserved, right? So you don't have to worry that introducing these techniques is going to compromise on the model performance. Now, one interesting question that we still have, right, is how well can we scale the watermarking techniques that we have been using for data attribution and data provenance to a massive number of users? Now, this remains an open question. So far, our techniques can scale up to hundreds of users. Now, the question, of course, is whether we can scale to millions of users. So there's still a lot of research left to be done for AI to check on AI. Right. That's all I have. If you want to find out more on actually the technical details, which I've not provided, please feel free to visit our group's website. And the QR code is up there. Thank you.
네, 말씀 고맙습니다. 글로우 AI
Thank you very much.
연구 중인 자원 효율적
So it was an insightful time learning about the practical implications of GLOW AI Research Group's latest work on resource-efficient AI and AI that audits AI. Please give another round of applause to Mr. Brian Kan-Xiang-Lo.
네, 오늘날 AI는 점점 더 많은
AI today requires more and more data, but since we have limited amount of resources, we need to be able to develop further computational power so that we can better process these data, and the system that will allow for a better audit of AI will be inevitable going forward. So the speech by Mr. Brian Kan-Xiang-Lo was not just about explaining about the AI technology, but also drawing insights that are required in the era of AI. So once the stage is set, we will invite up on stage panelists for panel discussion. After the panel discussion, we will have a short break. So we look forward to your active participation in this session as well. I believe the stage is set. Let's proceed with the session panel discussion. I will call on the names of each panelist. As I do, please come up to the stage. First of all, moderator Lee Kyung-il, CEO of Sotlix, Cha In-hyuk, Distinguished Professor at Graduate School of AI Policy and Strategy at GIST, Choi Jae-sik, Professor at KAIST, Kim Jae-chul, Graduate School of AI, CEO of NG, Kim Dong-hwan, founder of 42 Maru, Lee Moo-young, Vice President of LG AI Research, and Byung Ge-pung, AI Department Headquarter Manager at S-Soft. Please welcome the panelists with a big hand. Now I'd like to turn it over to CEO Lee Kyung-il to chair the session.
네, 안녕하십니까.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
연구자분들과 또
I am extremely honored to be able to be joined by leading experts and researchers and scholars from Korea.
패널리스트 잠깐 소개를
Let me introduce to you our panelists joining us today. We have Cha In-hyuk from GIST, as well as Professor Choi Jae-sik from KAIST, CEO Kim Dong-hwan from 42 Tomorrow, Vice President Lee Moo-young of LG AI Research, and Manager Byung Ge-pyung from ESoft. Please give them a big hand.
70분이라는 짧지 않은
We are given 70 minutes. That is not so short to have our discussion. I've prepared a lot of questions, so I hope that it's going to be an interesting session.
모든 생성 AI 그리고 또 요즘
Generative AI that is becoming the buzzword, and also AI agent is as well. But at the heart of all of these innovations, there is the GPT AI that rise very well. But we also have to think about Transformer.
7년도에
In 2017, Google published a report, Attention is All You Need. And with that paper, the world changes completely. If you remember the contents of that paper or the impact of that paper, or I would like to know if you have any memory of that experience of that event. So I would like to first ask the question to Professor Cha next to me.
사용해서 뭔가 해보신 게 언제
When was it that you used the transformer-related algorithm for the first time? I don't recall exactly when. I think the question is a little bit abrupt. I don't have a clear memory, but
제가 처음에 기억하기로는 어텐션
from what I recall,
나왔던 건 아니고
not everything was in attention model. I think that people began to use attention in the middle of the network, but
된다. 왜냐면
the exponential training was not very easy
익스플로딩이 돼가지고 학생이 잘
because it sort of exploded in the middle of training. But once the training was done, the performance went up. I remember hearing something like that back in the days. So actually, after 2017, including GPT and BERT-related algorithms have been applied massively to address the existing problems. So ever since, the direction of the research has also gone changes. So what is one change that you would like to point out or that you remember?
어텐션 메커니즘으로
Of course,
문제가 다
we cannot say that all the problems were solved with attention mechanism. It was the result, showing the result based on natural language was very important. And I don't remember very clearly, but whenever I listened to presentations at academic conferences, there were two shared points. First is it was a research done by university or universities collaborating with Google, or second type of presentation was presenting
좀 첨언을
papers or findings about the attention model.
텐션 네트워크
So at the time, having the attention network and making that into transformer, and when that proposal was made to Google Lab, it was not accepted because not feasible, it's costly, it requires a lot of GPUs, and further reasons they could not come forward to push ahead with the project. I don't know if that is actually true. And what I remember back then was I want to ask a question to Mr. Kim Dong-hwan.
텐션을 가지고 요 무렵에
So then utilizing the machine learning comprehension, I understand them for the 42 Tomorrow at that time had very good achievement, and also at that time including BERT, the machines reading and responding like human beings. So it was around that time, but now then similar to the previous question, so now then with the GPT or transformer coming out, and then now both for research and also for businesses, I heard somewhere that you have been quite shocked. So can you tell us more about it? Yes, so like you said, now we had the company was founded in 2015, and at that time it's not that we had that many products, so we thought that if we were to just get ready with the machine learning and also like text reading capabilities, then we would get some opportunities. But then now around 2017 the attention mechanisms were created, and then so around the time we were getting seed investment and also doing the business development, technological development, and also having some business approaches. So as the moderator has mentioned, in 2018, now the MRC, so the reading comprehension based global competition. So we came out number one in this global competition with Google. So we were doing the commercialization. So for example, in communications and also shipbuilding and maritime. And also the GPT, when this was first launched, now we were a little bit hesitant because now before LLM, then the MLC, this kind of technology, now we thought that we would be viable in the world with this technology. But then if it were to move on to LLM, then it is technology plus capital that you need. Then will this be possible for a startup like us? Was the question at the time. And then now OpenAI, now they came up with the ChatGPT much earlier than I had expected, like 3-4 years earlier. So then since then I had to think a lot about this. I mean, I had been working on this for so long. Do I now have to fold my business or not? But then now we have been doing some testing since then, and I could see that this was more for a general purpose. So starting with the B2C and then to get the hegemony overall, but then now we were doing AX and more vertical, so I thought that we would still be able to find some opportunities, and that is why we are still focused on that and trying to keep running and growing the business. Right, so 5-6 years ago when I met with CEO Kim, so we talked about, so at that time he told me that it was very hard to keep up with the changes before and after ChatGPT, and he also told me he was thinking whether they can survive or not. But then now I see that the 42 Maru, the company, is not only just surviving, but also is showing the possibility of growing into the future. So you have my encouragement and you have my support. So I believe that you also have the experience to move you beyond the current stage. Now then, this is the same question, but let me shift the theme. Now let me go to Professor Cha. So ChatGPT, it's been 3.5 years already since it came out. So in that week when the ChatGPT was launched, so the community was so noisy, and so I always subscribed to it, tried it, but then I couldn't use it for long. So sometimes it would give me a response, sometimes it won't, but then still, for it to become stable, it took, I think, a few months, but still it was quite shocking because at that time the biggest AI business in Korea, so I had been in charge of the largest AI business in Korea, and that was called ExaBrain. So what we had researched for 7 to 8 years, ChatGPT kind of like threw everything into the sand at that time. So for me, that was shocking. And then now, one day, my son calls me. So after it started the commercial service, and so my son was studying in the US, and then he asked me to give him my account number, account address. And I asked him why, and he says that he wanted to do his homework because all the other kids were doing it. Anyway, so I remember having that shock, and I would like to ask the professor about his experience or perception, and also afterwards, were there any concerns that you had felt? Right, at that time I was a leader of a business, and also I was in charge of the digital business in a large company in Korea. So I was responsible for like thousands of people. And in the previous job, so in the previous group, I also said that we had to go all out for AI, but that didn't work. And then also in the last employment, in a large company, again I told them that we needed to invest heavily into the AI, but that didn't happen. But that did give some support. But anyway, so when ChatGPT was first launched, I thought that I should first try it. So what I did was to come up with the strategy for the company. So I worked on it together with ChatGPT for about like 10 turns, and I thought that it was only ChatGPT 3.0, and of course at that time it had hallucinations and all, but then I thought that ChatGPT, it couldn't have been done better by anyone else. So the prompt engineering itself was also quite astounding, but I thought that, wow, it's just the beginning, it's awesome. Now we are all in big trouble. So we could do all kinds of decision making with this thing. So I remember thinking that at the time, and also
이제 답을 이제 대화 자체를
I put in the
영어로 해본 게
question
있었고 한국어로 해봤어요.
in
퀄리티 차이가 너무
English
많이
and
나서
also in Korean. I tried both languages, and the quality difference was fast. So again, that is because most of the knowledge in the world today is in English. So the knowledge and data is mostly in English, in another language. Well, then AI is created based on data. Then I was worried for the country. So then what's going to happen to Korea? Because, for all the researchers, we know that most of the advanced knowledge is in English. And also for the Korean researchers, engineers, they would also write their knowledge in English, contributing to the English-driven ecosystem already. So I thought, I was worried, what are we going to do for non-English speaking countries? So those were my two primary worries.
가장 큰 질문은 이거
One of the thoughts I had back then was, could Korea do it? Can a Korean company succeed in this field? If not, then we should shift rapidly to AI using nation. Back in the days, it was just after COVID-19, when COVID pandemic was nearing its end, and from January, we were able to gather in groups.
삼성전자에 있는
So at the time,
그룹에서 대표님들까지의 아침에 강연을
I had a chance to give a lecture or a special lecture at Samsung Electronics for the management, but only 1% of them had used.
그만큼 세상의 속도는 참
So I asked whether they had used ChatGPT, but it was less than 1%, even though 3 months had passed since its launch.
LG
So
연구원하고 저도 인연이 있는데
LG AI Institute and I, we have a very special relationship. 5 to 6 years ago, LG Group came to me and the chairman said that they want to make an AI institute, and Transformer was already out there. So he said he wanted to implement, or a personnel from there wanted to implement a similar project, but it was very costly, and a lot of people were opposing to that idea. And
토론을 했었던 게 기억이
the
납니다.
person also sought my advice as to whether we could gather a pool of experts to implement this type of project. But one of the important institutions that contribute greatly to the development of AI in Korea is LG AI Institute. So I would like to ask similar question to Vice President Lee Moo-young. What have you been up to in the past 3 to 4 years? And not only ChatGPT, but Claude and other models have been released, and it's very difficult to catch up with all of these different models. So can you share with us some anecdotes or some experiences that you found interesting?
이 얘기를 꺼내기 시작하면은 이제 나를 세울 수도 있긴
I
한데.
think this is truly an endless story. We can talk about it for years and years, but our LG AI Research Institute was established a long time ago, but we thought that the AI era would come about, and LG thought about how to respond to this new era. And one of our top priority was to gather talented people to identify AI talent so that we can become a group that makes good use of AI.
사실은 이제 LG 전자에도 인공지능 연구소가
Of course, there is LG Electronics AI Research Institute. Each and every LG subsidiary has an AI exclusive dedicated group, but
독립적인
we wanted a separate entity at the group level to conduct AI researches. So it was established in November 2021.
어떻게 잘해야 될까 하는 고민을 이제 많이 했었을
So
때
for many, many years, we have been thinking about how to implement AI-related researches, and we got a lot of feedback from LG subsidiaries. We also tried to identify the needs of the subsidiaries to assess what kind of value AI holds for their businesses. So based on our research or survey, we identified that the vision inspection was required hired at different manufacturing facilities, and also forecasting product sales and product demand was important. There were efforts being made to run business based on that forecast, and also predicting the raw material prices to know the timing of the procurement and purchasing. And at the assembly or production lines in the factories, they wanted to know about how we can identify defects in advance. So there are lots of issues faced by the sites. If you think back 4 to 5 years ago, at the time, even though you read reports or consulting reports, we know that AI is needed and was needed, but it was very difficult to extract value from the actual field. And a lot of people understood the need to adopt AI, but some people were skeptical about the utility and the efficiency of AI back then. But now, a lot of things that we once thought was not possible is becoming a reality, and is being translated into actual performance and earnings of the company. So if we boost efficiency, we can minimize cost and maximize profit. So AI Research Center is working together with other subsidiaries on addressing these matters. So when GPT-2 first emerged, we believed that the pace of such development would be so great that LLM will play a very important role. So at the time, we decided to fully implement the LLM project. Of course, it required a lot of budget. In the beginning, we were skeptical whether we could really make it feasible. We needed a lot of data, and if we had enough capability to implement such research, we did go through a lot of trial and errors, but we launched the Exxon 3.5, and this year we released another version. So now we have gained confidence that we can compete globally. Of course, it continues to require a lot of money, but Exxon LLM-based approach has helped to improve efficiency of operations of many subsidiaries. So we believe that it is worth continuing to invest in this field. Of course, there are lots of challenges because we didn't have a lot of AI applications or use cases in the beginning, so people working on the field didn't really trust us. So what was important is to convince the C-level management first by the group, and then try to expand the adoption of these initiatives at the working level. And now I think that we have secured the foundation and the basis, and we're seeing the efficiency of AI with our very eyes. Yes, with regards to utility and how AI is being used in business operations, we're going to listen further to those experiences later on. So Eastsoft company, as a company, is not very well known, but there is the Alyak or Alzip, which is an antivirus software that many Koreans use. So Eastsoft supplies this software. So I would like to ask Managing Director at Eastsoft, Mr. Byung Ge-pung. So when it comes to your company, you began with the R&D and software, and you expanded your business. So you had to go out there to your clients to talk about it. Was it easy to convince the client? Or when it comes to AI, what were some of the concerns and challenges when you approached your customers with your initial findings?
저는 이제 사업 쪽 출신입니다. 그래서 AI를 경험한 지가 그렇게 오래되지는 않았는데요. 저는 이제 백그라운드가 그 방송 쪽에서 근무를 오랫동안 했습니다. 3년 전, 4년 전에 이제
I was in broadcasting for quite some time. So then about 3-4 years ago, now Eastsoft is about 35 years old. And about 10 years ago, Eastsoft thought doing a new business to
그 과정 속에서
challenge
굉장히
a new
많은
market.
AI를 경험을
And in
했습니다.
that time, we have
저희가
also experienced quite a lot of AI.
폭력 상황에서
So, for
그 목소리를
example,
인지해서 이 상황이 맞는지
in a
아닌지
situation of violence, and then to recognize the voice, to tell whether this is real or not, and also in an emergency whether there has been a fall or not. So in order to recognize that, we have been also developing the technology. We have also been introducing outside technologies to ours. And then now, in this process, we realize that for a mid-sized company to work in AI is really challenging. Because now, let's say if it's a medium-sized company doing this work, but then the large company might all of a sudden launch their own model, then where does that leave this mid-sized company? Now then, about 4 years ago, the AI human, so my CEO, he went to CES, and then now he found some business opportunity there from AI human. So then he recruited some people from broadcasting, including myself. So then coming to the company, so not from the AI perspective, but then from the market perspective. So from the market perspective, how can we apply AI? So I believe that that is where we have been focusing on to find the areas of AI applicability. Now the AI human technologies, now in the beginning, so you were asking about how much struggle there was in the beginning in the market, but then I think for AI human it was different. So to introduce the technology to others and then to discuss the business opportunities and to ask about the applicability, then now because of the, let's say, the awesome features that the AI has on the outside, then we would discuss so many business opportunities. So then sometimes I would go to explain the technology, but then I end up discussing the business use cases for 2 hours. It happened so many times. So then in the beginning it was a matter of focusing. Then over time, what became the biggest challenge for us was, now because it is a technology that kept generating images, now because of the GPU, the cost of the GPU, so it was difficult to apply them to everywhere we wanted. So that was one of the biggest challenges. So now where we are focusing the most is cost efficiency. To achieve this, then let's say utilizing the multi-region cluster in Azure to use the peak time, and so by doing so we can also handle a lot of the throughput in a very efficient manner. We also have the kiosk outside for the AI human, and this is full size. So right now the AI human is operating almost with no cost. So now before coming here, I looked up the cost about 2 years ago, and I see that the cost has come down by about 100 times. So I have my utmost respect to the developers. But so now the question is, again, applicability, the use cases, and utilizing this, senior care, or also in the broadcasting, AI dubbing or lip sync dubbing. So they could also be other opportunities, and we are actually seeing good results from the market. So we are already seeing meaningful business results. All right, thank you. So of course, at different positions from different perspectives, we have gone through AI for the past 3 years, 8 years, but now we see that in the past 3, 4, 5 months, now there have been quite a lot of changes, but then to the entrepreneurs and the engineers, probably you have seen much more changes than that. But now, do you believe that they have actually affected our lives, not just industries? Now I remember it was in 2010 that I saw, or that I used iPhone first. So everyone was, all in this hype. So iPhone 3S being launched, and then now all the researchers and also like my friends in Germany, wherever, and then they were saying that iPhone is so excellent, try it. And I asked how much, and it's like 700,000 won, and I was shocked at the high price. I still remember that. And then now belatedly, so it was in 2010 that I bought the iPhone. And then now for 2 months straight, so before going to bed, I would fiddle with my phone for like 2-3 hours at night. So downloading all these applications, my wife got so mad at me, so I still remember that. And not only that, but this was in fashion, and that is, what they would say is, when you die, then I will bury your cell phone with you, and then the wife, and then the husband would say, then please bury me where there is Wi-Fi connection. So then, since then, the smartphone or the internet, they have changed our lives so dramatically in within 3 years. So how we play, how we think, how we work, everything. So compared to that, then now the question is about generative AI led by ChatGPT. So do you believe that it is also wreaking so much havoc or changes in our lives and industries? So when we think about how we play, how we work, how we live, so if you do believe that the generative AI is changing all these different ways, then why? And if not, then what are the current limitations? And do you believe such limitations can be overcome? Is the next question that I would like to raise. So then first to Professor Cha. So I do realize that this may be a daunting question, but what do you think? Do you believe that generative AI is changing our lives and industries? If not, then what are the limits? Right, so of course, I am not aware of everything that's going on in Korea, neither in the US, but now personally I am a US citizen. And also most of my network, now half of it is in the US, half in Korea. So I, meet these people here and there. But then now what is different is that now with the generative AI, of course you mentioned this, but then now the infrastructure, so infrastructure and the cost, so they are the most important. So then how much they use it, so how the companies use it. So how much they use it, there's a vast difference between the US and Korea. So almost to the point that there's no comparison. So in Korea, it seems like it's not really there. So I would like to point out the risk of just looking at Korea and thinking it seems like not much is happening. So about a year ago, now we have come upon the era where AI is generating AI. So we are not there yet, full force. But then now Samsung Electronics is doing this. But then now I believe that AI is now designing the next generation semiconductor. And then this next generation semiconductor, what this is that this will then run the next generation AI. So this would reduce the workload for the engineers, more work for AI. So of course, what we have seen in sci-fi, so science fiction, so machines generating better machines. So that cycle has already started. So in the industry, what is the most important? So today, of course, the energy, food, and the most important of today's era would be AI and semiconductors. So we see those changes outside, but then consumers don't see them. We normally don't see them. So it's like ChatGPT, it's like just a toy, but then that is not what it's all about. And then now let's say Amazon. Of course, you all know Amazon Web Services, but the AWS, what the issues recently are. Well, I tend to look at the issues, but then now another word that is in fad is algorithmic management. So this is also a big topic among the scholars. So what this means is that now when you're running your company, so there are employees, there are people in your company, then all their performance all their output, all their process would be monitored by AI. And then they would also dynamically change their job. So because this person is not doing well here, then we'll give him another job. So all these work, the performance evaluation is normally done once a year or twice a year by other people, but then it is AI. It is AI monitoring, surveying all the processes of all the people, optimizing where it can, but where it cannot, then it will let people go. So now we have this ongoing evaluation, and the company is being managed by algorithms, and that is why they call it algorithmic management. AWS has already started it. Other companies are following suit. So what we normally say, workers, labor, so the future of work, future of labor. And normally we would talk about, if AI comes, then we might lose our job or we might not. But even those who still hold on to their jobs, then for those knowledge workers or for all the other workers. So just like they would monitor the workers in the plant, they can do that with machines these days. And that is already happening in the US, and that has been a big topic recently. So depending on the development and the utilization of AI, how it affects our lives is quite different. So perhaps Korea is not experiencing that yet, and that is one of my concerns.
Yes, so Professor Chai is saying that using ChatGPT like toy, and it's not just like about asking questions like, do you know Lee Kyung-il or Seth Looks, but in order to boost efficiency, management, AI is being used, but Korea lags behind in applying AI for these ends. So in other words, I think this is what you're referring to. Just last week, according to the news that I saw, Microsoft fired about 5,000 developers, Google 3,000. So in just the span of 1 week, more than 10,000 software developers were sacked in Silicon Valley, and about 300,000 software developers were fired just last year alone. So it's the largest number in any industry. So they seem to be working in a very creative field based on their expert domain and expert knowledge, and yet they are beginning to get fired. And probably underlying on this news, we can learn that AI is indeed transforming the way we work and the structure of different sectors. And even though we don't feel it at first hand, we would eventually feel it at first hand here in Korea. So there are lots of software companies and startups in Gangnam and Pangyo, and these companies may need to face these challenges in the near future. So Mr. Lim, I would like to ask you a question. From the LG Group's perspective, I would like to know if there are many efforts being made to improve efficiency as well as innovation. And do you expect the same kind of things to happen in your company as well? Using AI and feeling its utility, all of that is very much subject to inflection point right now, meaning that there are lots of leading companies taking greatest advantage of this trend, whereas on the other side of the spectrum, there are businesses that fail to completely perceive this trend. And it's probably people are very busy or for other reason. So I think there's a great variation and great difference among countries and businesses. However, we at LG Group, as I mentioned earlier on, we are seeking AI transformation in a very proactive manner. That is the direction set, and thus we are conducting active AI R&D activities. And there are lots of utilities. For example, we use ChatExon internally, and when we draft reports or translate emails, we use AI. But we use AI for optimizing our processes, for example, production processes. Of course, a lot of experts in the past worked on optimizing our production lines, but we applied AI. And AI identifies the gaps that the experts couldn't see. And Lee Se-do, the professional Go player, also mentioned in his presentation that there are lots of different possibilities that can happen in the Go, and people were skeptical whether AI could actually win a human experience. But now we cannot imagine a human winning AI in the field of Go. So AI is thus being used in many applications, and it also helps to generate profit in the areas that we considered that were unknown to us. Of course, all of these transformations cannot happen overnight. There are lots of hurdles we need to cross, There's a legacy systems that need to be considered. We need to revise and revisit our work process. And AI is not going to address all of these issues. There are businesses or enterprises that are going faster and those that are much slower. AI is, of course, an irreversible trend. And yet, AI cannot solve everything. So I think that it is better if we can focus our efforts on applying AI in the areas that require much higher efficiency.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much.
다음 주면은 대한민국의 새로운 정부가
Next week, we will have a new government in Korea.
어느 분이 되실지는 모르겠지만
We don't know who is going to become the president,
가장 강력하게 주장하시는
but
게 AI를 통한
a lot of the candidates place a lot of focus on AI, how they're going to make Korea's heartbeat again with AI. If this is not just a political slogan, a political rhetoric, then I think that we'll be able to face a lot of transformation, AI transformation going forward. ChatGPT is used not only to make our work more efficient, but it's also going to have an impact on every aspect of our life, and that kind of future is not very far-fetched. I think we're nearing the middle of our panel discussion, and next I would like to deal with the topic of now. What should we do at the present? What kind of challenges are we making right now? So first of all, I have a question for Professor Che.
So you have been involved with many different R&D with many countries, and also you are directly involved with management as well. So what are you the most interested in these days, and also what is your research now, and what are your thoughts? Yes, that is also a tough question, but now about what we need to do is my biggest question now. Now, just looking at the ecosystem, then, of course, in Asia, now the country of envy when it comes to AI is Singapore, we say. So the Chinese talent and the Hong Kong talent would also go there, and also the big tech companies would flock to Singapore. There are a lot of Asian headquarters and also big tech there already. So then these big tech are also drawing in talent. So that is how it continues to thrive, is what they say. But of course, the economic downturn is quite severe these days. So then there is also a tough competition for AI talent. Of course, KAIST, the AI graduate school performance is very good, but now my concern is, now when they graduate, then will there be enough jobs, enough high-quality jobs for them? So for a company to pay their workers well, there are two ways. One is to receive a lot of investment, or to have good revenue from global services. Then, now, investment is a limited source, then that means that we need to do global services. Then what would make that possible is the question for me. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because, now realistically speaking, let's say we want to make LLM, and then we want to make it a good technology. Then we give like 1 billion won to each employee. So then with 100 employees, then this would be like 100 billion won. So then for 3 years, 300 billion won. So I'm just talking about salary, not the computing power. Then will that guarantee that there will be global services? So that is also a big question. So then I see that it is not only about GPU or money. Then what would be the differentiating factor? OpenAI, when it first launched ChatGPT, then now many, and then they would spend and night working to make it global services. Where did they get such passion? Where did they get such energy? So that is one question that I keep having. So that, yes, is the biggest question. So how can we motivate people? So not just myself, but also others. Others meaning the people in my company and also people in the graduate school. So how can we muster that kind of passion for AI development? And now this is what I think these days. Now LLM is doing good work for general tasks, but then now what many say that in special fields, then the answer that I get from ChatGPT is not very surprising. So now in areas that I don't know, then it does give me good information, good new information, but then now in areas where I have been in for like 20, 30 years, then the answer does not really surprising. So, of course, Professor Cha mentioned this, but now like medical or finance as well. So vertical AI, now even just in each sector, it would be quite large. And so right now, there are really no killer apps yet. So I believe that it is still possible to produce global services by focusing on such a vertical applicability. Yes, so you are an entrepreneur and a professor at the same time, so you're also quite concerned about your students, so understandable. Now then, just one more question to Professor Che, because this is also a question that I often get. So when I was in graduate school going through a PhD program, then there was the CMU, which is the Carnegie Mellon PhD program. So now in the week that I was supposed to go, I quit and set up a company called Saltflux. So that was about 20 years. So then last year, I believe that the Carnegie Mellon, the school, the employment rate was like 50%. My son is in Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and so he is in computer science, and they say that for them, the employment rate is, again, only about 50%. So then all the computer science majors in the US, now they can no longer get even internships, is what I'm hearing. So I'm also hearing this from my son as well. So it really sounds scary. But then now, even look from the industrial perspective, then for my employees, now we are also teaching like coding programs like Copilot to our employees, and that is to reduce costs and enhance productivity. Then now they also say like Microsoft and Google, now they're saying that about 40% of their codes have been generated from AI. Then because now those who major computer science and then have work experience for 7-8 years, so their skill level and using Copilot after learning it just a few days, so then they say that the latter would be much more efficient. But do you believe that really is true? Because if that is, then the new graduates, newly graduating, new employees, will they really lose out on job opportunities? Then, now if they lose out on this 7, 8, 10 years of work experience, if they lose this, then in the future, the skilled or the experienced workers or engineers, how can we develop them? So this is a question both to Professor Che and Professor Cha. What do you think?
Is it a difficult question? Well, it is indeed, but I think we have to seek an answer to that question. I think that maybe 20 years ago, businesses that went global with the game said there was a difficulty with coding because in the process of developing a new game, there are engines, so they copied the engines and pasted them, and they sort of like revised them, but that was a lot of manual work was what they said back in the days. But automation of coding, or coding automation, I think the copy-paste work can be done by AI. So it could be automated by AI. So when it comes to programs that can be automated, we do that too as well. Of course, we will continue to see innovation, be it transformer or GPUs. So that is why
이제 소프트웨어 엔지니어들은 계속 더
Software engineers that are developing engines will be required in the future. So after the launch of LLM, you might think that engineers might not have a lot of work to do, but there are lots of components inside the LLM, storage, memory, and also explainability. And I think that a lot of tools will be made to that end. And there's also unlearning engines. So all of these different engines will be developed, but they cannot be done through AI because there is no training data. So once new things are being developed, we will require more and more software engineers. But there is a cycle of AI development. For example, there is an expert system, and there is an increased number of expert users, system users, and then when there is Bayesian, then there's a growing number of Bayesian users, and then that shifts to neural network and so forth. But when it comes to transformer, and in between the architectures of transformer, I think there's not only transformer, there is pooling, there's renewal model, and there are lots of different training techniques that were embedded, but it's the transformer that is most well performing. And who is going to seek innovation? If somebody seeks innovation, then software engineers will be needed to dabble that as well. But the reason a lot of them are being fired or losing job is because in NVIDIA GPU, it is very much focused on training the LLM and developing use cases out of it. But I think that with the advancement of new technologies, a lot of the manual work could follow. And as for with the explainable AI, we can look into the LLM, and there are lots of coding that are generated, but there are lots of manual work that are currently being done, and there are lots of new things that should be developed. So Professor Cha is working on explainable AI or XAI project. So he's in charge of that project in Korea. So the future AI is not black box nor white box. It could be like gray box. And inside that gray box, we have to try to understand human and machines at the same time. But I would also like to ask the same question to Professor Cha. 1 month ago, I was in the US and I met with AI engineers at Google and Microsoft. And what they're concerned about is that up until now, software developers are working on developing codes or code development actually were fired all of a sudden. But things have changed because in each company, AI engineers began to receive emails for their dismissal. So with the development of acceleration of AI, the AI software developers, its numbers could also dwindle, is one of the concerns I heard. Do you believe this is true? Do you think is this how you view the future?
Well, then at a forum like this, it would be better to say something positive, but then that sounds hard. But now, from a historical perspective, then before the industrial age, so in the past everyone had something to do. So perhaps it was slavery, but also because there was not enough production per demand, so people had to keep producing. And so as long as you were living, then you need to do something, make something. So you needed to make your contribution to the country. So they also encouraged people to have a lot of children because children, so having more people was also labor. And then, so then overall we see that there are those who make positive contribution to the society, but also we are seeing a growing percentage of people who need to be taken care of by the society. But then thanks to industrialization, we also have the production capacity to handle that.
분들의 프로포션 점점 줄고 있어요. 계속.
So in fact, there is a reducing proportion of people who are participating in labor. But now AI is accelerating this phenomenon. So human beings are known to be making the most intellectual contribution, let's say in certain professions. So perhaps now those who are at the very top, so they may be safe, but even in these fields, their jobs are no longer completely safe. And now then, all the new graduates, so including in intellectual work, we see that many of them are being replaced. So, there is what's called the dark factory. So we don't have the dark factory yet, but then now it's Xiaomi's plant with mobile phone assembly. The mobile phone assembly is very hard, so I have seen it myself, so it really needs a lot of work. But now they made it, they automated it, and this was done by AI. And this is called dark factory because they don't need lighting anymore because it is fully automated. Now, what the US is saying that the next stage would be dark enterprise. Dark enterprise meaning company, meaning that all the lights out in a company. What does it mean? No people needed, almost none. So then everything that is happening inside a company, like for example, development, purchasing, services, so all of them could be replaced. So then in an economic system, then to actively participate and to realize ourselves, so the people who can achieve all these will continue to decrease if we leave things unchecked. So then how are we going to commonly put a response to this, and also how can we keep having people produce value? So I believe that is something that we really need to seriously think about. But I don't see much discourse on that. We are perhaps too much focused on how to be profitable from AI, but I think we really need to broaden the discourse. Thank you. So then what Professor Cha is saying is that from social structural perspective, the impact is already here, and no one is safe anymore, and he also worried about negative outlook. Then perhaps why don't we shift gear to the more positive outlook. So thank you very much for your patience. But now this question is to CEO Kim Dong-hwan and Manager Pyeon Ge-puk. So then, what are the opportunities that we need to look for? So where do we need to focus? The strategy, by dictionary, what it means is the allocation of resources. So in other words, to acknowledge the resources and the limitations that we already have and utilizing them or overcoming them to win the battle, to win the war. So that is actually a military term. Anyway, so then of course we have all the infrastructure, but then now we have other companies, even bigger companies with the infrastructure and the capital. Then just competing against them with only what we have is not going to be successful. So then what do we need to do? So, and also what do we need to prepare? So I would like to ask the two speakers on what we need to do.
네. 저희가 사실 사전에 어떤 얘기들을 할지 전혀 이렇게
So I wasn't actually informed of the questions before coming here. So I don't know how to respond to those questions. But since you mentioned we should talk about something positive, but I think that we have to start off with something that's more skeptical and negative. As the two panelists already said, most of our development workflow is being replaced with AI. And sometime this time last year, computer science professors actually said that programming students who use ChatGPT to produce reports. But it's a complete different story if you generate a report completely out of a ChatGPT and not just referencing ChatGPT. So the performance of ChatGPT has gone up dramatically. And when professors talks about this issue, I tell them the following. these people will become the first programmers who don't know how to do coding because AI is developing and also debugging for them. One thing that caught my eye in the Silicon Valley was that in the past, when startups do their business, they always started off with a CTO. But nowadays, if you look at the startups, there are many companies that do not have CTOs when they set up shop. So they have a solution product, and they get investments for that. As for our company, we promoted that 80% of our employees is going to be AI in 3 years' time. And we really have to prepare for that trend because this trend is inevitable, irreversible. So what should we do? First of all, I think that the Korean people should use AI well in their daily lives or at workplace. We say that AI is going to replace the jobs of humans, but that is not true. People who use AI well will replace the jobs of people who do not use AI well. If you think about the past, before the emergence of cars, there were carriages. So the horse riders, at the time, they held protests, being against and opposing the emergence of cars. So they also enacted a law where the carriage should not overtake cars on the street and so forth. So it's quite ridiculous. But 100 years have passed by, and people who work in the automobile sector is much greater in numbers than those who work in the horse carriage sector, for example. So I think that we really have to make good use of AI, to use it very well, and constantly think about how we can use AI very well to boost work productivity, work efficiency, and ultimately to secure global competitiveness. I think that is the first step we need to take. In our everyday life, it goes the same. 25 years ago, when portal websites first emerged in the world, I think that we saw a similar pattern. People thought that if you need something, if you want to search something, you can just call that person up to ask that person. So people were hesitant about using internet portals. But nowadays, internet portals has become a fully integrated into our daily life. It's like as if we are breathing. So there are lots of people who make good use of internet and also intranet for a company to do their job well. But there are also employees who cannot. So the same goes for AI. AI will be used in many different sectors, and we need to know how to make good use of AI so that we can secure more competitiveness, and I think that is the key. Yes, so what opportunities should we consider as our focus area? To answer a little bit that question, I think that our entire society has not yet escaped from the shock of DeepSeek. In China, with the emergence and the release of DeepSeek, China actually thought that the whole nation thought that they could compete with big tech as having built this foundation model. So of course, we have limited resources or available resources and manpower and infrastructure, but can we leverage all that to achieve what we want? It's something that we have to think about, and I think we're missing out on one important thing. That is, whether it's foundation model or AI, they are not the ultimate goal, but they are the means to achieving our goal. How are we going to leverage these tools to make ourselves life better and to increase our competitiveness in different industries? But I think that we fail to do that with regards to DeepSeek. So how are we going to leverage a vertical AI to make better use of AI is an important issue.
vertical 분야에서
All right, thank you. So then, in the vertical field, Korea being number 1 or number 2 at least, so there are actually quite a number of them. So then in these vertical domains or vertical industries, then whether we produce them directly or not, to create business opportunities, I believe they will be possible. So for example, agentic AI, then not just the LLM, but then about how we can automate the workflow or the processes and how we can gain business opportunities from them, then I believe that that would mean that for Korea, what we need, what we can get is not just a foundation model, but then also for other business opportunities as well. So then now another question is, now for manager Pyun, so then what eSoft is thinking in terms of how it is envisioning its business opportunities.
사실 존경하는 차인혁 교수님께서
Thank you. Now, actually, Professor Cha has given a weighty question, and whenever I also think about this, then I also become quite somber and grave. But now also as someone who is in charge of business in a mid-sized company, then again, the imminent question is how we can drive sales and revenue. So we are, I explained earlier that we are focusing on AI human. And AI human would be many people, I believe, they believe that AI human is inevitably associated with people's jobs. So then the question is, what people is not doing now, but if it is done by people, it will be much more meaningful. So what are those things is what we are thinking about, and we are also researching those domains intensively so that we could converge certain domains, and when the needs arise from them, then how can we target them? So one example would be senior care. So from about 2 years ago, the senior market has grown considerably. Then we thought about what AI can do in this market. And of course, led by large companies, in emergency situation or what seniors cannot do on their own, AI can help. So it is such segments that have been growing quite rapidly. Then, now in these segments, what can eSoft's AI humans do? And we concluded that it would be a conversational partner. And that is why we started to create contents for seniors. Because content sector, now of course creating content directly for seniors, that is quite challenging, especially in terms of the cost, because watching ads and linking to purchases, that is quite low. So in fact, we have no ads almost, but still we recruited the singer Taejina, and we also created this AI human, and then we also created these contents for like cognition, education, dancing, singing, and also even today on the IPTV, so under the recognition that such contents had been highly needed, we continue to create such contents. So we have been working on this initiative, providing conversational partners to seniors. We have been working on this together with the Ministry of Welfare and Health. So it is about to be commercialized. We have also met up with 400 seniors in nursing homes and senior homes. But now what's quite surprising is that now for young people, when they see AI content, then try to find faults, like this is unnatural or this is not right. But then for seniors, what they do is now in front of the AI humans, they would tell them their life
거의
stories
대부분의
from
시니어분들이 눈물을 흘리세요.
when they were young, and in most cases they would also shed tears. So when I also watch them, then I am also quite touched, because seniors, now the elderly, they want to talk to people, but oftentimes they cannot find anyone to talk to. So then with the based on chat GPT, like AI human, now the AI human can communicate anytime, anywhere. So what people cannot do, AI human is providing the services on people's behalf. Then I believe that we are creating the kind of market that did not exist before. So with these contents, we also met up with Microsoft, and Microsoft also had been thinking a lot about AI human, especially about the ethical issues, but then now we got to talk about our partnership and also perhaps doing business globally, and the biggest trigger for that was the contents for seniors. So this is what we will continue to do. So if we can find market segments where humans are not working, then perhaps we can also open it up as the market for AI and AI humans. Thank you.
벌써 시간이 이제 다 지나가서
Thank you very much. We're nearing almost the end of our time. We only have about 10 minutes left, so please bear with us until the end of today's session. So one of the biggest social challenges in Korea is the aging population. So we're experiencing unprecedented low birth and super aging. So in 20 years' time, the super aged population will be twice as that of now. And when it comes to active population over the age of 18, it will dwindle by half. So in that situation, AI can help to create a lot of opportunities to tackle our social issues. So I think that's a great insight. When I was watching TV some time ago, do you know a Korean program called 짠한형? So it's like a YouTube program. I'm not trying to promote the TV program, but there was a brand called 아점당 that was promoted. And I think that ad was very interesting because it says that the program will provide services or respond to customers 24/7. So the program or the platform was based on AI, and I think that could also create opportunities for growth in the future. Now, I'm going to ask another question to Professor Choi. As I mentioned earlier on, we will have a new government coming in next year. Of course, I don't know about the third party, but I actually serve both the political parties. And many experts say that promoting AI industry and promoting AI policy require governance. Our sponsor, Ministry of Science and ICT, is at the forefront of this initiative, but there's Ministry of SMEs, Ministry of Welfare, and Ministry of Industry and Energy. All of these ministries have plans for AI policy, and they have a budget like 100 trillion won and so forth, but we need to have a good control of all of this. Some people say that we have to create AI-dedicated agency, AI-dedicated ministry. I don't know how things would unfold in the future, but let's be creative. At the presidential office, we can think about having like a director who is going to be in charge of all AI policies in Korea, all AI budget, and that person will be tasked to coordinate different roles of ministries, and maybe one of you can clinch that role. So, Professor Choi, if you could be in that role, is there two must policies that you want to really implement, or is there some specific regulation that you want to address or ease? Well, if I were in that position, what would be the two things that I want to do?
반대에 해당하는 좀 뭉쳐져 있는 무언가 인프라를 만드는
I want to create a infrastructure that would help coordinate different related initiatives. If you think about in the past why we couldn't have like an ERP company like SAP, it was because the IT teams, the groups all had like their specific IT teams, and IT businesses could not take the lead in implementing this type of projects. So we were not able to mobilize all of the efforts of different IT leaders in coming up with something that is very of a breakthrough. And the second thing is, as for the general AI, the issues it faces can be addressed with infrastructure, but in the vertical domains, there are things that cannot be addressed just with infrastructure. So you mentioned about the Ministry of Welfare, and that's for the healthcare, and manufacturing is the Ministry of Industry and Energy. So we have to make sure to heed to the requirements of the users, and so that they can take a very active role in devising the policies together with the government. So we have to make sure that the market is very much centered on consumer-centric market. I mentioned about setting up AI office under presidential committee, or maybe we can think about chief AI officer at the government. So I would like to, if I were to propose Professor Chai as the chief AI officer, what would you do? I gently decline your offer.
But then if they were to have really like a chief AI advisor to the president, then perhaps maybe we could mention these several things. Now, recently I have also met with some people in finance, and so they were quite concerned. So now the share of Korean economy, semiconductor is like 25%. So a few years ago it was 20%, but now it's 25%. So it's such high concentration. But now China is catching up very fast, and it's only like 3-4 years away that China surpasses. And in many other fields, we have already been surpassed by China. So now they are very much concerned. But now when you look at the Korean economic structure and also the output and the export, then from 20 years ago, our structure remains almost unchanged. So we have still been feeding on the traditional manufacturing. So that is our given reality. And so of course we have our own language, we have our own culture, we have our own identity. That's good. So it's great that we can stay in with ourselves. But then producing global services, this could actually be an obstacle. So that has been quite difficult for us. So we have not produced any services that would dominate the world. So I'm not saying it would be impossible, but it has not been done yet. So of course we have to sustain our manufacturing. And then now with the AI, so with the AI technology, then perhaps we can also support where we are strong. So for example, the manufacturing capability. So perhaps we can innovate everything about manufacturing utilizing AI so that our industries can withstand the attack from other countries. So at least we need to earn them time, like 10 years time, and AI can help with that. Now, looking at the past 20, 30, so actually looking ahead to the next 20, 30 years, so we need someone to look ahead 20, 30 years and prepare for the future and completely transform our society. If not, if we are just looking at 2-3 years out, then we might be swept away by all these changes that are coming to us like a hail. So we need to look toward the future and also try to leverage our cultural advantages. So, for example, being mindful of others, consideration, being kind, and also shying away from conflicts. In other words, we are good at compromises too. So a lot of people also like Korean culture. So then maybe you can also leverage that culture. Like, for example, helping people live in harmony. So maybe you can also leverage AI for that purpose as well. So that is also one way of preparing for the future of AI. All right, thank you very much. So yes, next month, 2 months later, then we will see more policies take shape that would determine the future of Korea as a nation. So that is almost all of the panel discussion that we have prepared. So as we have been engrossed in our discussion, 70 minutes have flown by. So yes, it seems like AI is still spending money rather than earning. So OpenAI, so their revenue as of last year was 2 trillion won. So within 3 years of seeing first revenue, now they are at 2 trillion won. But then, so that is remarkable, but I also heard that their loss is 7 trillion won, so they have spent 9 trillion won. Now in Korea, there is probably no company who can stay afloat with such huge losses. So not just dozens of trillion, but hundreds of trillions of won being attracted into these countries, into these companies to do their business and provide their services. So yes, that is also a subject of envy. But then also looking at Korea, then for Korea to survive in this geopolitical situation for hundreds of years, and not only surviving but thriving. So Korea also has strong potential. So I believe that the challenge is upon all of us, businesses and engineers and scientists, everyone. So now then, with the wrap-up remarks, I would like to conclude the panel discussion. So not just for Korea, but then we are seeing the changes in the world, not just in Korea. So now at this inflection point, it seems that we are navigating our way into the future, looking at different directions. But of course, Korea is saddled with many other issues, like, for example, industrial structure and export, and also our societal conflicts. So we need to move beyond that so that we can ensure sustainable growth and development for Korea, for our children and the children of our children. So to that end, I would like to ask everyone here in the audience, and also especially the gurus who are the panel participants today, I do hope that we can all sow the seed for such future. So with that, I would like to thank all the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, 5 panelists and the moderator, for your participation. Please take your seats. Now, this wraps up the second session on Brain Revolution, the era of generative AI. We will now take a 20-minute break before proceeding to session 3. Please enjoy the coffee available in the lobby, and I will see you back again at session 3. Thank you very much.